It's Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Jason Davis here with you on a beautiful Monday. Well, not if you're in the Mid-Atlantic or the Northeast where you're about to get snow dropped on your head, or already are. That's the case. No, it's not Monday, it's Tuesday. I forgot yesterday was a holiday, and we were off yesterday. January 21st, 2014. Tuesday, January 21st, 2014. It's good to be back. It's going to be back on the air. I think first things first, we got plenty of soccer to talk about today. Things happening in Europe. Certainly some fallout from the MLS superdraft that we'll get to. We're going to talk to our friend Jeff Kassouf from Equalizer Soccer.com and NBC Sports about the NWSL draft that happened last week as well. So we'll get to a lot of the soccer topics that are undoubtedly on your mind today. Andre Lewis, Nicolas Anelka, West Ham and their continuing financial drain over the Tevez situation. How long ago was the Tevez situation, Trevor? What year was that? What season was that? A long time ago. So we'll talk a lot of soccer today. But first things first, from a housekeeping point of view, right here on Soccer Morning in NASN, we have to give a gigantic thank you to everybody that stepped up, helped support the show during our Indiegogo campaign, our 2014 Indiegogo campaign. We have reached our goal. That happened. Did it happen last week? Did I mention this already? That it already happened? Friday it happened. Okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah, I think it did happen Friday after the show, which is why I don't recall thanking everybody for helping us reach the goal. We have reached the goal. In fact, we're over the goal right now. There is still 41 hours left. If you go to soccermorning.com, you'll be redirected. If you haven't contributed yet and you still want to, there's nothing stopping you. We're not limited to what the goal was. That was the number we needed to hit for a couple of reasons. And we've hit it, and it's fantastic, and hopefully everything is going to work out in 2014. We're incredibly excited about 2014, and we're set up, and you guys have helped us get there. 358 people helped us get there. And if I could thank you each individual. In fact, we are thanking each one of them individually, aren't we? We are doing that. This is going to be like getting married. We're going to be writing thank you notes for the next 6 months, which is fine. I have no problem doing that for everybody that contributed. Obviously, we had a couple of other rewards. Some of you that contributed will get to be DJ for a day on Soccer Morning. Some of you will be here some of you will pick our music, and I will use it, and it will be fantastic. Some of you will get to guest host on the show. How many guest hosts do we have lined up for Soccer Morning based on the Indiegogo campaign? You should know this right off the top of your head, Producer Trevor. 10-ish, he says. So 10 times between now and, hey, it's open-ended. We don't have a deadline here, but we'll work with you. We'll get Trevor contacting everybody to try to line everybody up for a day. Oh yeah, Jared Dubois gets to co-host thanks to Scott Utterson, I believe. Thank you to Scott Utterson. I only remember his name specifically because he bought a spot for Jared Dubois. But thank you very much to everybody else who contributed to Soccer Morning's Indiegogo campaign. We have reached our goal. It is going on for the next 40 hours or so. If you haven't checked it out, just go and check it out. That's all we would ask it at this point. We were incredibly surprised by the response that we got. It reflects that people are enjoying this show and that there is a place for this show. I think that's the thing that Trevor and I will take away. Not only the funding to help us move forward, but that people do enjoy this show, that this show has a place in the American soccer sphere. And generally speaking, our listenership is American. I don't want to leave out some of the foreign listeners who have contacted us. Thank you very much as well for listening in Europe or Asia or Australia or wherever you are. But for the most part, this is an American soccer, we talk about the world. We talk about soccer happening everywhere. But it's an American-oriented show in a lot of ways. And I think that again, we have we have some justification for continuing on to do this show. If nobody had contributed, I would have said, hey, that's it. That's the people have spoken. Let's move on with our lives. I'll go back and chain myself to a desk and input numbers into a computer all day, which is what I was doing before this show. And I would hate my life, but that's what I would have had to do if we hadn't reached the goal. So again, thank you very, very much. All right. Enough of that nonsense. Let's get into the soccer. Again, Jeff Kassouf lined up today. We're all working on a couple of other guests. It's a little difficult coming out of the long weekend for us to get everybody lined up. The phone lines will be open throughout this show, 347-756-6276. If you have anything coming out of the weekend that is particularly important to you that you want to bring up, feel free to call me. Hit us up at Soccer Morning on Twitter as well, and we'll be sure to get to whatever you want to talk about. Now, and I hate to do this. I really, really hate to do this because we have been over and over and over this discussion so many times. And until there is some sort of hard legislation, hard and fast rule put in place, and I don't even know how you could possibly do that, we will always be talking about diving. We will forever be talking about diving. There is no reality where you can simply say to the players of the world in every league, especially the most visible ones, where people are where the tension is going to be most intense, or international competitions like the World Cup or the Euros, or even in this part of the world with the Gold Cup or Copa Libertadores or Copa America, or anything happening. There is not a reality where you can say to the players of the world, stop diving, guys. Stop simulating. Stop accentuating fouls. Stop making it look worse than it actually is. Because players will always look for an advantage. It's part of being a competitive creature. And I'm not going to justify every dive that's ever happened. Certainly not going to do that. There are some that are more egregious than others. If you dive without contact, we all know you did it to try to get a foul or to get a penalty or to get a card. We all know you're quote unquote cheating. But within the rules of the game, again, as they exist right now, and look, I think that, and I'd have to get stats to back me up here, but I think that yellow cards for diving are probably a little bit more prevalent than they've been in the past. Not overly so, but you'll see players get carded for diving. And even in those situations, there is enough gray area between was it a foul or was it a dive? The problem is that we have this dichotomy. It's either a foul or a dive, and there's no room in between. And that's not to say that there isn't that judgment's not possible. If you see Brad Guzan come out and make contact with Luis Suarez, and Luis Suarez drags his leg to accentuate the contact, goes down in the box and earns a penalty, you have a initial reaction to the live play, then you see the replay. You see it over and over again. The commentators, they try to figure out, well, was it a dive? Was it a penalty, a flat out? From a referee's perspective, there's only a couple of different options. He can either call the penalty, and in this case, with Luis Suarez and Brad Guzan, that's a penalty. That's a penalty for me. Or he can card Suarez for a dive, and there was something there. There was something on Luis Suarez's part that was simulation. That was a little bit more than was necessary. Players aren't running full speed and all of a sudden one of their legs go dead. That doesn't happen. That's a clear indication that a player is looking to get an advantage. And the way that the game works, can you blame him? Does it nullify the foul if there's a little bit of simulation? No, of course it doesn't. There can be both. But there's no way to adjudicate that within the laws of the game. Unless the referee says, nothing, I'm not calling anything. There was contact, but there was also a little bit of simulation. Those cancel each other out. They nullify each other in my mind, the referee's mind. The only decision maker that matters, the referee. He can do that, but that's not going to keep the controversy from coming up. That's not going to mollify the Liverpool fans who feel it's still a penalty and have a right to believe so. It's not going to make the Aston Villa fans happy who see a dive and believe there's one there. And how much of this discussion coming out of the weekend, again, is because it was Luis Suarez? Because the man's got his reputation. Because the man has done this before, and he's got all of those other things on the back end of this resume. As we process yet another instance of Luis Suarez being involved in controversy, how much are you biased by the racist remark, which was declared that way. I'm just calling it as it was declared within the English game, and the biting incidents. How much of that is impacting how you feel about this? Maybe you hate Liverpool. That's a bias. That dictates how you feel about this particular situation. Are the problem. And I've seen a couple of people put this opinion out there, and this is the truth. But as human beings, we'll never get there. If you are going to rail against diving in the example of Luis Suarez, if you're one of those people who said that was a dive, that's cheating, that shouldn't happen, that's not part of the game, then you better be ready to call out your team, the players on your team, when that happens, and they get a penalty, and they win a game because of that penalty. If you can tell yourself that you'll be fair about it, but come on. In the heat of the moment, when your club needs that 3 points, when your team needs that goal to advance, and there's a hint, some indication that your player took a dive, that your player accentuated contact, that your player left a leg in order to go down when maybe the referee wouldn't have called it otherwise. You're going to be appreciative of that player doing that thing. There's some purist snow individuals out there. Maybe you are a paragon of virtue, and you would call out your own team, your own player for doing that, and refuse to accept the victory. Maybe you're that guy. You're odd. You're strange. You're not like the rest of us. The rest of us who wear our hearts on our sleeves when it comes to these things. And again, you bring your biases to the table. Even if you're a non-partisan watching Liverpool and Aston Villa play, you have a gut reaction to what happened in that moment. Whether or not Brad Guzan, and again, this thing is happening so fast. So fast. And we have the benefit, sitting at home, of seeing that ultra slow motion look, here's Guzan's forearm touching Suarez's leg, and then Suarez's leg stops moving. And look, he's definitely pushing himself. The referee doesn't have the benefit of that. The referee's calling that in the moment. Producer Vince.
Oh, hey, Jason.
What's up, man?
Hey, when you're talking about diving and everything, man, and one thing that I feel like that the NHL has done fantastic is whenever a player does something wrong, usually it's a hit. They'll say we suspended the player for this amount of games, and then Brendan Shanahan will come out and he'll have a video explaining, okay, this is what happened and this is why we're suspending the guy. I really feel that, in a lot of ways, soccer is really behind the times when it comes to discipline. Okay. I understand that they want to keep power with the refs. Okay, go ahead, Jason.
No. I mean, I think that you have an issue of undermining the referees. That's always going to be. First of all, how many referees on the ice in an NHL game? 3?
2, and then one watching.
Right. Sorry, there are 2.
Three.
There are 2 officials on skates. Is that what you're saying?
There's 3. There's the refs and then the 2 linesmen.
Right.
Because the ref's the one who hands everything out, but the linesmen are there as well to help out.
Sure. Those guys are working as a team to make those calls. If a linesman calls a hooking penalty, it's not like the referee's going to overrule him 99 times out of 100, right?
Of course.
In soccer, and maybe this is, I've heard the argument that soccer needs additional refereeing on the field. We've obviously got the fifth official behind the goal line thing. But in terms of actually making those calls on the field, I've heard the argument that maybe soccer could do with a referee in each half. I'm not sure that makes anything particularly better, but it definitely limits the amount of space. The amount of distance that these guys have to cover. I don't know. Again, you have an issue of potentially undermining the referee if you go back and make and again, if there's a penalty called, okay. And the player steps up and scores the penalty and wins his team the game and has 3 points towards whatever or advancement in a tournament. And then you come behind him and say, that wasn't a penalty. What do you do? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the ramifications of, Do you take 3 points away from the team that got the penalty? Do you award both teams 1 point? Do you how do you replay the game? How do you do that, Vince?
Like at the end of the day, I do feel like, refs are humans. They're going to make mistakes, of course. But I do feel that if you want to get rid of diving, you have to do retroactive punishment, and not just for diving. I mean anything, reckless challenges or things of that nature. There has to be maybe a committee or something that looks at the footage and decides, we can't have this. We can't have this. We can't let it keep happening.
So the result would stand, but you would. This has happened before. We've gone back and looked at dives before, but retroactive punishment for the player. I suppose that's one way to deal with it. But I mean, we're talking about something that's so pervasive, and it's not just on penalties. That's the highest profile incident. But it's happening in midfield. It's guys just sort of letting their bodies go limp, or it's guys covering their head or covering their faces on every 50-50 ball in the air. It's a million different little things, and it's not that I like diving. I would never say that I like diving, and when a player out and out cheats, it sucks. I'm just not sure there's a way to get rid of it that won't fundamentally change the game and or cause further problems.
Well, I mean, Jason, you talk about bias and everything. I got to ask you, let's say, come World Cup time and Dempsey dives to get a penalty against Ghana. And he gets, let's say they have retroactive punishment at that point, and he gets booked afterwards and he misses the next 2 games. Would you have a problem with that?
If those are the rules that are in place, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. I mean, again, we have to talk about whether or not if those rules are being applied fairly across the board, then no. I mean, but the problem is with everything, as with everything else, this is subjective, right? So you could say Clint Dempsey he dived. He dived. He's getting a retroactive punishment. He misses the next 2 games or the next game, whatever. Okay, if that's the rule, I'm going to be angry that Dempsey dived, not necessarily that he got suspended. But if there's another incident in another game, or their next opponent has somebody who questionably dived but misses out on the suspension for whatever reason, because it just doesn't meet the criteria, because somebody judging that dive didn't see it that way, that's when the controversy erupts, and that's when we have problems with how you apply this evenly across the board. I mean, we get upset when it's obvious a player dives, and they benefit from that. We get less upset when a player gets a yellow card, but there are plenty of circumstances where players have been yellow carded when they didn't deserve one because they didn't dive, but it looked like they dived. It's an issue. That's all. Thanks for the call, Vince. Got anything else, man?
Just like later on, when you get to the show, like I want to know what are your how do you rate Agudalo's chances of making the World Cup team if he performs well in Holland?
Okay, appreciate that, man. Thanks a lot. We'll definitely get to that. 484, you're on the air.
So, I mean, this is probably opening an entirely new can of worms.
Uh-oh.
But what if there was some way to add a secondary criteria when looking at these plays and seeing more of, did the player actually make an effort to stay on his feet? Because for me, that's the most infuriating part of, even if there is contact, players just flop in and, like you were saying, just making zero effort and just going straight down. I mean, it may be a legitimate contact.
You're talking about those. You're talking about those infuriating 50-50 situations where there's certainly contact. There's definitely a foul, but the player also makes it so obvious that everybody sees it as a dive.
Exactly. I mean, again, this is another subjective thing that we'd be opening refs up for criticism.
Again, I mean, I think that's exactly what I was trying to get to. That gray area between. Both things are happening at the same time. What do you ask your referees to do? Do you ask him to ignore that play? I mean, that's fine. There's going to be controversy after it because one side's going to see it one way, the other side's going to see it the other way. I suppose you could deal with that. I suppose you could. But if we end up in a situation where referees are consistently ignoring those 50-50 plays. And again, it's not always 50-50. It's 70-30. It's 60-40. Sometimes it's barely a foul, but more of a dive. Sometimes it's really a foul, but that guy really did go down, just a little bit too easy. And again, referees running at full speed to catch up to a play that is, that's in front of them by 30 yards. How do you make that call?
Yeah, I mean, I guess additional officials, but it's just to me, and maybe this would be changing the game too much.
It further complicates the game.
I enjoyed the physicality, and if in a perfect world for me, the player should always be trying to stay on his feet, regardless of, unless it's obviously a blatant, dangerous tackle.
I am 100% with you, and we have this odd notion. Thanks for the call, man. We have this odd notion of. I mean, it's only odd because the rest of the world does not ascribe to it on the same level. But we have this odd notion of integrity and whatever. I mean, in 2010, around the 2010 World Cup, Nike put out a commercial that's in which a bunch of youth players were talking about how American players don't dive, and thank you for not diving, and thank you for not doing those. That's not true. It's not true. American players may not flop over as egregiously as some individuals, but they take a dive. I've seen Clint Dempsey fall down easily 1,000 times. I've seen Landon Donovan do it. I've seen these guys take the same advantage that we are talking about with Luis Suarez or anybody else. 240, you're on the air.
Hey Jason, can I pose something to you, man?
You can pose anything you want.
Do you think that diving is any worse than putting in a professional foul to stop a counterattack? Because that's the yellow card offense. It's like the same thing. Like, I think diving is just sort of part of the game in some sense. I have a sort of like Latin sense of it, that you kind of just have to deal with it.
I'm coming around to that notion, certainly. And you could argue that professional fouls are equally detrimental to the spirit of the game as diving is. And if we're going to accept professional fouls as part of the game, then we should be accepting diving. Now, again, that doesn't mean that referees should look past diving. We're not saying that. Referees should still, if it is extremely obvious to them, they should still be calling dives. But there's clearly something. There's clearly something we have to get over. Otherwise, we will be talking about this ad nauseum until the end of time, and maybe that's good for the game on some level, but it really just distracts from everything else that's happening. I know Brad Guzan went on ESPN FC to talk about whether or not Suarez dived, and I didn't hear it, so I don't know how he explained it. I'd be interested to check that out a little bit later. So, with your posing of professional fouls versus dives, I think you have a decent argument there.
Cool. Anything
else, man?
No, that's it.
All right. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Yeah. Phone line's still open. 347-756-6276. I don't want to make this entire thing about diving. In fact, diving was only going to be the first topic of the day. We were going to move on fairly quickly. There were some interesting results in the Premier League over the weekend. Chelsea taking care of Manchester United. And tell me, you guys know I am not rumor guy. I refuse to buy into rumors until the player is holding the jersey of the team he's been connected to in a press conference surrounded by thousands of cameras and microphones. Well, not thousands, that'd be a lot. So Juan Mata to United. How much of that is smoke and how much of that is a bunch of BS? I'd be curious. All I've seen is mention of it. £40 million price tag? I don't know. But the thing I love about that possibility, and again, it's a rumor. I don't know if it's happening. Somebody call me if it does. The thing I love about it is that if Chelsea sells Juan Mata to United, that is the ultimate insult. I mean, from a Chelsea Mourinho perspective, it's the ultimate insult. Here, have this player. First of all, we don't need him. Second of all, you get him, you're still not catching us. You're still not good enough. I just love this subtext to a potential transfer between two of the big four at this point in time, with United where they are on the table, with United going through the struggles that they've been facing. And I'm not delighting in United's pain necessarily. I just find that potential dynamic to be fascinating. We had RVP go from Arsenal to Manchester United. I don't know that had the same kind of context. That was a lot on RVP. I don't know how much Juan Mata is driving this. Clearly, the guy wants more playing time. Clearly, the guy wants to be the man somewhere. And based on his Premier League history, he deserves a shot. Shouldn't be languishing on the bench at Chelsea. All right. Also out of England, Off the field stuff, not related to what happened, and I'll go review the rest of the results a little bit later on. The ones that stick out: Arsenal taking out Fulham, no surprise there necessarily. Clint Dempsey didn't play all that well, but that's because Fulham never had the ball, as far as I could tell. Crystal Palace beating Stoke City, nobody cares about that. Sunderland and Southampton played a 2-2 draw. Where's the other draw? Liverpool and Villa. We talked about the dive, obviously. That's Villa needed the point, and that's the kind of game that Liverpool, if they're going to be title contenders, and they're probably not, they're a 4 team. If they finish out the season, then that's the kind of game that they would need to win in order to be title contenders, and it did not happen. West Brom and Everton yesterday as well, just from an American perspective, with Tim Howard in goal. All right, the off-the-field stuff that's come out of this weekend, we have not yet put to rest Nicolas Anelka and the Canel. The gesture he made some weeks ago after scoring a goal for West Brom that has since been revealed to be the personal creation of an individual in France, outwardly a comedian, but a man who's made quite a bit of controversy over anti-Semitic statements. He's a fascinating guy. If you have not yet read up on the guy, Dieudonné, I believe his name is, go read up on him. And before any of this stuff happened. The fallout here is that the West Brom shirt sponsor, Zoopla, which apparently is like an English Zillow, if you know Zillow, they are pulling out of their sponsorship with West Brom over the controversy because West Brom continues to play Nicolas Anelka. Now, West Brom doesn't have enough depth that they're going to be able to afford not to play Nicolas Anelka if they have him on the books and they're paying him and they're trying to maintain a decent season in 2013, 2014. But considering the controversy, it may have been in their best interest to sit him. Now, the thing about this Zoopla news, and the thing that is interesting about this, is that I think, saying it most simply, is that Zoopla is getting positive PR for doing a lot of nothing, essentially. I'm not saying that there aren't people. Apparently, the company is co-owned by a Jewish man. I'm not saying that there's anything. I'm not saying that they're manipulating the situation, but their contract with West Brom does run out in the summer. It runs out after the season. What they're effectively saying is we're not going to renew our contract. That's it. That's an act of nothing. They're not doing anything. They're just going to sit there. Now, were they considering renewing their contract before Nicolas Anelka and the Canal? I don't know. Maybe. But again, they earn the positive PR points by saying we're going to drop out of our sponsorship of West Brom. And now apparently Anelka has finally been charged by the FA for the gesture. Don't know what that's going to come to. This isn't, maybe we addressed this when he originally did it and sort of the fallout and getting some of the background. But I have a really hard time pinning down just exactly what should happen to Nicolas Anelka, how the rest of the world should respond to what he did. Now, remember, we had in the aftermath of Anelka, we had the pictures of Tony Parker and Samir Nasri. Was Thierry Henry photographed with him as well? I mean, there were several guys that were photographed with Dieudonné doing the canal, and I'm not sure they're all racist or anti-Semitic. I think that they have identified with this particular individual because he has a message in other areas, and maybe the anti-Semitism is all wrapped into it, that they can get on board with. He certainly speaks for a portion of the French population who may otherwise be underrepresented. Let's say it that way. And I'm not French, and I'm not in that society, and I'm making a very black and white judgment about this. And I'm not justifying any anti-Semitism on his behalf, on his part. That is certainly wrong. And I will say that Nicolas Anelka is not so stupid that he didn't know that this gesture and this connection to Dieudonné was going to cause him problems based on the anti-Semitic rhetoric of Dieudonné. So something should happen to him. But what exactly? What exactly should happen to him? And this is not I think from an American perspective, and I'm speaking for some people, and if I'm wrong about this, you tell me. You call me and you tell me, you hit me up on Soccer Morning. But I think from an American perspective, we see this, we hear the guy, we hear it's an anti-Semitic thing, we hear about the guy, the comedian slash politician slash anti-Semitic, whatever he is, and we see it in black and white terms. We see it as, he's a racist, this is wrong, in a story. There are a lot of layers to it that go beyond that. There's a lot of, there's some more subtle edges to the story. And again, that doesn't necessarily justify Nicolas Anelka's actions. When it doesn't justify Romelu Lukaku defending Anelka, which I just think is stupid. Don't, even if you agree, even if you want to defend Anelka, Romelu, don't do it in public. He did apparently, and here's the worst part. This is breaking today. Raf. Hold on a second, dude. Hey, hold on 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hold on a second. Romelu Lukaku, in a video that was posted to Everton's official website, defending Anelka, saying he shouldn't be suspended for the canal. My problem with this isn't that Lukaku has an opinion. He can have an opinion. My problem is that this was on the Everton official website and then taken down immediately because duh. Why would anybody at Everton sign off on putting a video of Romelu Lukaku defending Anelka when he's been charged by the FA, when it's clear that there is anti-Semitic rhetoric involved in this gesture, whether he meant it that way or not? All right, Raph, what's up, man?
No, I was going to say that, with respect to Dieudonné, the man is anti-Semitic. And I say this as somebody who's Jewish, who's nominally Jewish. And if the guy who really broke it down was Laurent Dubois, who writes Soccer Politics. Mm-hmm. And he really went into some great detail. But if you look at Dieudonné, for the last few years, he's been really campaigning on a really anti-Semitic platform. Okay, and so it's really hard to divorce. But
yeah, and what I know, Raph, and I'll definitely, I don't know if I read Dubois' piece. I should definitely go check it out. But what I know so far is that Dieudonné positions himself as anti-establishment, and within that is anti-Semitic because he sees that Jewish conspiracy, or he sees French society as being overrun by Jewish influence. I mean, it's happened in this country. We just don't ever take it seriously.
Right. And we shouldn't take it seriously.
No, of course not.
My point is that it's really, I know that people go ahead and point out the anti-establishmentarian portion of Dieudonné's comedy, and that might have been true at the beginning of his career, but he's really taken some political stances, even going so far as running on an explicitly anti-Semitic platform for the National Front in France, which is neo-fascist, that anybody who's going ahead and busting out the canal should really be thinking 4 or 5 times rather than twice about busting out that move.
Yeah, and let's say, I know we cannot ever get in the heads of Anelka or Nasri or Tony Parker or whoever, okay, and really understand their motivations here. But again, clearly, it's all I'm asking, and I'm not justifying the anti-Semitic portion of what Dieudonné does, and as you said, it's a lot of it now. But what we shouldn't do is throw Anelka and Nasri and Parker and all of these other people who have been connected to him or photographed with him doing the canal. We shouldn't throw them aside and ignore. Essentially, I'm trying to understand a little bit, and again, we can sort of block off. It's wrong. This anti-Semitism is wrong. And when you do the canal, you connect yourself to Dieudonné and therefore open up yourself to the criticism that you are either anti-Semitic or sympathetic to anti-Semitism, and you deserve to be punished for that. But there needs to be some kind of discussion over why somebody who most of the world respects, like Tony, I won't use Anelka, but I'll use Tony Parker, why he would do that without thinking of the repercussions. Because I don't think Tony Parker's a stupid guy.
No, he's not. And I think this is also connected to the whole FIFA thing, where you have the whole kick it out, the whole anti-racism campaign, and yet at the same time you have these racist incidents that keep on taking place, whether it's Italy, whether it's the Netherlands, France, what have you, Russia, and so on and so forth, in terms of supporters clubs and in terms of the supporters, making racist chants and hurling racist abuse African players and, Afro-European players,
right,
so to speak. You know?
Yeah.
So you can't really do the one for the other, and I think people go ahead and, it's easy to focus on one player or one, or a group of players, and then sort of elide
it's obvious,
that larger discussion that needs to take place.
Ref, it's obviously easier to discuss those incidents. I mean, with Altidore or what happens in Russia, because the division over the thing that's happening, the racism that's happening is racism we understand. Black players being abused by white fans. In this situation, you have multicultural France coming to the defense of an anti-Semitic comedian. I mean, that makes it a little bit more complicated, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it really does.
Yeah,
thanks for the call, man. I'll let you go.
I appreciate it, Ralph. Thanks a lot. 347-756-6276 is the phone number. Vince getting in on Twitter. Producer Vince. Tony Parker is stupid. He cheated on Eva Longoria. Okay. Very good, Vince. I think that's a point in your column, certainly. I think Mike here, Thomas 19064 on Twitter. Is it sincere anti-Semitism or just bad jokes? From what I understand, first of all, French comedy is impenetrable to me. Impenetrable. First of all, my French is very poor. Je parle un peu français. I mean, I'm not even sure how correct I was there. So my French is poor, and then trying to understand French comedy, which is traditionally much more difficult to sort of grasp. It's not a laugh a minute type of situation all the time. Remember, I mean, I'm sorry to go back to the stereotype, but these are the people that love Jerry Lewis. And hey, Jerry Lewis was funny. Well, not funny. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that we just can't understand here. And therefore, as Raph said, go read Laurent Dubois. Go read some of the original French sources on this subject. I mean, everybody comes with even within French society, people come with their biases to the table here. But I mean, again, you can't excuse anti-Semitism. You just can't do that. So Nicolas Anelka deserves to be punished because he made a gesture he had to know was going to be controversial. And if he didn't know, ignorance is not an excuse in this situation. That's my fault. I mean, that's my opinion, is that just because he can say, well, I was just supporting my friend, the comedian. Well, here's the problem. Your friend, the comedian, is an anti-Semite, and you have now connected yourself via this gesture to an anti-Semite. Heavy stuff, and no clear resolution. And I know that in the recent past, the recent past since the canal became an issue and became more understood or widespread as something to talk about in the English-speaking world. Didine's been banned from a couple of different cities from doing his shows. So, this is a continuing topic. He may even be on trial again for some of his rhetoric, some of the things he said, hate speech that he's pulled out. So, again, it's a complicated situation, and West Brom is dealing with the repercussions. Apparently they feel fine playing the guy as long as this is roiling, because he may be their best hope, but maybe wiser heads would have said sit him down. And that's not because Zoopla is threatening to pull their sponsorship. That's because you paint your club in a bad light when you're dealing with, again, whether or not the club can justify it and Anelka can justify it doesn't really matter if public perception is you are enabling an anti-Semite, especially when, again, the from a PR perspective, it doesn't look good for West Brom. And now Zoopla gets to sort of say, we're above this. We're not going to deal with West Brom anymore because you continue to play this individual who's now connected to an anti-Semitic French comedian. It's surreal in a lot of ways. And I expect we'll get a movie one day. We need a Hollywood movie about Didine so we can all understand him in bite-sized pieces, right? Because that's where stupid and need to be spoon-fed all of this stuff. All right. Also in England, again, I mentioned West Ham. Get my West's correct. West Ham dealing with the fallout from Carlos Tevez. You remember Carlos Tevez ends up at West Ham after he ends up in West Ham. Controversy over third-party ownership, breaking the rules. West Ham breaking the rules on third-party ownership. Tevez helps West Ham stay up at the expense of Sheffield United, and now there is a continuing fallout from that. Now, there's already been negotiations about how much West Ham owes Sheffield United for their relegation. This is from The Guardian. I'm just going to try to get to the important parts here. The true cost of true cost to West Ham of the deal negotiated with Sheffield United over the Carlos Tevez affair is greater than first thought. According to sources involved in the negotiation, West Ham could end up paying £26.5 million in compensation. They put the much disputed total value of the deal at 21.5, payable in staggered installments until 2013. If the club is sold for more than £95 million, and the club is currently up for sale, West Ham will have to pay a further $5 million. The first £1.5 million pound payment is due in May, and subsequent installments are staggered to coincide with West Ham's major income streams, such as its merit payments and share of TV rights money from the Premier League. The Icelandic owner of West Ham, I'm not going to try his name because I will get it wrong. Gudmundsson? We're going to go with that. That's the last name. Had hoped to negotiate a sale of the club by the summer, having recently had a bankruptcy protection afforded to his parent company. Good times at West Ham. But this is the part that's interesting to me. A lawyer representing a group of around 20 members of the Sheffield United squad relegated in 2007 has insisted that they have a good case to sue West Ham, while former manager Neil Warnock has said he is also considering his options, and Leeds United chairman Ken Bates plans to seek compensation on bonus transfer payments that would have been due had the Blades stayed up. Man, I know it's not soccer, it's not football. It's just fascinating that we're still dealing. 2007, it's 2014. Still dealing with this. Still dealing with it. And this is just, if you think that this is interesting from a litigation perspective, Sheffield United suing West Ham over compensation for having been relegated when West Ham fielded what should have been an ineligible player. If you think go check out what's happening in Brazil with litigation sort of littering the football landscape. We talked to we talked to our friend Tim Vickery last week before, and he talked about the state of Brazilian football and their calendar issues and the response from the players. Bomsenso FC, the group of players who are gathering together to make a case that Brazilian football has got to change. I was reading on geostadia.com, which is our friend Christopher, give me the name because I'm blanking on it. I apologize. Christopher Gaffney, Christopher Gaffney, who we talked to during the summer about the Brazilian protests, and I'm sure we'll be talking to as the World Cup gets closer. He's got a fascinating post on Geostadia about the end of the Brazilian season basically ending up in court. And this is not the first time. It's not necessarily new, or it wasn't. I don't know if it was the championship or relegation. If Fluminense maybe was involved, or it's just when there's so much money on the table. When there is so much money on the table, and staying up or going down can determine the future, the long-term future of a club, then you're going to end up with lawyers getting involved. And that's no fun for anybody. I mean, yeah, I understand Sheffield United fans are probably still pretty raw about what happened 7 years ago, especially since they are now in League One. Relegated from the Premier League in 2007. Relegated to League One in 2011. Long way to go for Sheffield United, a club with a rich history, to get back to where they were. And you could point at Carlos Tevez and say, hey, it's his fault. Or it's West Ham's fault for getting involved in the Carlos Tevez business. So there's that. Yeah. courts involved in all of this stuff. At least it's not suing to get back into the Premier League or some nonsense like that. I mean, you might be able to judge. I don't remember what the immediate fallout was. I vaguely remember all of the litigation that was happening, paying less attention back then than I was. All right, 15 minutes until we talk to Jeff Kassouf about the NWSL draft and certainly the Houston Dash expansion draft. Megan Rapinoe leaving Lyon to go play the full season with the Seattle Reign. We'll talk to Jeff at 11, but when I come back, let's talk Andre Lewis and the Cosmos. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Jason Davis back on Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, Tuesday edition after Martin Luther King Day yesterday. I hope you observed that holiday in the appropriate manner. I certainly had a nice little talk with my son, who's 5 years old and obviously can't process everything, but attempting to convey to him some of the importance of Martin Luther King in his life in this country in particular. All right, let's talk about Andre Lewis. Let's talk about the young Jamaican international who was drafted by the Vancouver Whitecaps on Thursday in the MLS Superdraft, number 7 overall. By all accounts, a very talented player who wowed scouts and coaches at the combine in Fort Lauderdale ahead of the draft. Showed calmness on the ball, made the right decisions despite being less than 150 pounds, showed some strength, which is obviously a critical component of a midfield player in MLS, and obviously was rewarded by a draft pick, number 7 overall. Fantastic. Great. Wonderful. And he gets to go play with Darren Maddox. I don't know if they know each other, but they're both Jamaican. I'm sure that'll help him settle in. In the aftermath of Andre Lewis being drafted, it comes out, and Ives Gullersep is the first I saw report it at Goal.com, that he'd already signed a contract with the New York Cosmos. In fact, he signed that contract between the Combine and the Super Draft. And was therefore the property of the New York Cosmos. I hate to say it that way. It's the wrong way to say it. Language we use in soccer is wrong. Andre Lewis was contracted to the New York Cosmos. So a lot of what's happened over the last couple of days on the MLS front has been trying to determine whose fault this whole thing was. Is it the Whitecaps' fault? They obviously just got through the Camilo situation. Was it MLS's fault? What did they know? When did they know it? Who did they communicate with? It's definitely not the Cosmos' fault. They didn't do anything wrong. Although I wonder, the timing of his signing with the Cosmos is interesting. The reports are that Lewis trained and took a trip to Spain with the Cosmos last year in 2013. Wow. Sorry, 2013. But did not sign a contract. Did not sign a contract until post-Combine. Then went into the draft. Was already on the eligible draft list, obviously. Was already a player who MLS teams could draft. He had been Combine. He's on the list. Why wouldn't they think they could draft him? I'd be angry if I was the Whitecaps. Because the most logical thing here is there are two logical possibilities. One, MLS did not know that Andre Lewis had signed with the Cosmos. Now, I don't know what the mechanisms for learning that information would be. I don't know if the agent's supposed to file something. I mean, certainly if this hasn't been cleared by U.S. Soccer and he's not registered to the Cosmos, I'm not sure how MLS would find out. But the other logical assumption is that they did know, that they knew he had signed a contract between the Combine and the draft, and they didn't inform their clubs. Now, you could inform your clubs, which would probably mean Andre Lewis either doesn't get drafted or the clubs have to be very satisfied that whatever situation ends up happening should they draft him benefits them. Does this benefit the Whitecaps to take Andre Lewis on loan? Or if there's a sale, who's paying that fee? If I'm the Whitecaps, I'm making MLS pay the damn fee. There's a fee involved. I don't know that there are wider ramifications. I did write something that should be up at U.S. Soccer Players later today, pending an edit, that makes the argument this could be a little interesting wrinkle for MLS. That the Cosmos are now a team that can throw around their weight with players like Andre Lewis. Now, he's a Jamaican kid. He didn't go through the college system. He may not have been the known quantity up until the Combine on the draft, at least in this little soccer world. I know he played for Jamaican internationals, and clearly the Cosmos knew of him. I'm assuming some other American teams knew of him, or other MLS teams, Canadian and American, knew of him. But he wasn't getting the press of a Patrick Mullins, who was scoring goals at Maryland and winning awards. He wasn't getting the press of Andre Blake, who was starring at Connecticut as a goalkeeper. So maybe it's not on the same level. But it'd be interesting if suddenly the Cosmos are in play for some of America's, and let's throw the Caribbean in here as well, and maybe Canada, some of the best talent coming out of those areas. Because they have the name. They have the cachet of the Cosmos brand. And they've got the cash. We know they've got the cash. I don't blame Andre Lewis for signing the deal. I find it interesting he was so excited to be drafted by the Whitecaps, despite already having a professional contract. It's a very strange situation. Was it all about leverage? What's the deal here? 646, you're on the air. 646, you're on the air. Who's this? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I was just calling because I wanted to listen to the show. I guess that's not like
you wanted to listen. Okay. Well, there are other ways to listen. Do you have internet access on your phone right now?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, it's on Stitcher. It's on TuneIn. You can get it that way, man.
And what is the station name?
Just look for Soccer Morning or NASN. You'll find it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, man. Appreciate it. NASN app on your Android phone as well. You can find that in the Google Play Store. NASN.TV/live. That's a first, right? People calling in to listen to this show. I'll just put you on hold. We don't actually work that way. I can't put you on hold just so you can listen to the show. You want to call? If you call in, I'm putting you on the air and I'm asking what you want to talk about, and you should probably bring it. I'm shocked. Look, nobody's got a take on Andre Lewis. I know take. We've ruined the word take in sports radio in this country. But nobody has an opinion on this Andre Lewis situation. Is there any blame at all? Again, if in the end the Whitecaps get their player that they wanted, that they drafted, and they don't have to pay the loan fee or the transfer fee, whichever situation comes to pass with the Cosmos, then ultimately they're fine, right? The Whitecaps, they've taken a PR hit because this is on top of the Camilo situation, and they've had a very bad offseason. But I don't think that's fair to the Whitecaps. Meanwhile, are the Cosmos a fly in the ointment for MLS in the future? I mean, I'm not saying that this changes the face of player acquisition or amateurs turning professional in this country in the near future. I'm not saying that. It might very well be a one-off situation. A player that the Cosmos happen to like, they happen to sign in between the Combine and the Super Draft. MLS didn't take him off their draft list. Should MLS have taken him off their draft list? And let me spin this to another topic that's related to the draft. I highly recommend you go to AmericanSoccerNow.com and read the piece by Brooke Tunstall on MLS keeping underclassmen out of the MLS Super Draft. Because it's a fascinating look into how MLS does their business. Now, there's a pool of players that if MLS is not going to allow into the Super Draft, because remember, this is all about cost control. You'll get it if you read the article. It explains it all very well. MLS is trying to keep players from having leverage. If there is a potential for a player to have leverage, MLS is looking to squash it. Period. In every situation. In the case of underclassmen, if they allow a sophomore to declare, and the sophomore says, all right, I'm declaring for the draft. Draft me. And a team says, okay, we're going to take you with our second round pick. The player can say, give me this much money or I'm going back to school. He's got leverage. And again, I wonder how much of Andre Lewis signing with the Cosmos is about leverage. If MLS doesn't give him what he wants, go play for the Cosmos. Got leverage. Michael DeVoe on Twitter, DeVoe PDX. Lewis would be a big deal if he had picked the Cosmos instead. The first player to get drafted but choose Cosmos will be big. Okay, that's very possible. That because he ultimately decided to go for the Whitecaps, or at least go train with the Whitecaps and try to make the Whitecaps, that kind of mitigates the impact that the Cosmos being part of this game, part of this process will have. Gringo Mark, it's a contract matter. MLS seems to have money to sign. Why not take a chance? Good move by the agent. Kenzian of Meta Gang, this situation just reminds me of the Joao Plata controversy, but if Vancouver knew about the Cosmos stuff, no problem. Again, the reporting is, and I'm leaning on Ivan Scholarstep again, is that the Vancouver didn't know, and that nobody knew, or not enough teams knew. Jonathan Tannewell talking about the American Soccer Now piece by Brooke Tunstall. MLS won't admit a player into the draft pool who doesn't have an agent. Hiring an agent ends NCAA eligibility. Jonathan, I'm assuming Jonathan read the piece. I think at one point that's sort of addressed. Maybe it's not. Maybe the agent isn't addressed, but there is a discussion about how NCAA rules on eligibility don't actually mention soccer. They mention the big sports, but they sort of leave. So on a technicality, I wonder if players could retain their eligibility if they sign an agent, because I'm not sure it's explicitly forbidden by MLS, and I haven't verified that independently. Caleb J. Rowe on Twitter. MLS absolutely should have taken Lewis off the draft list. Would cause future players to hesitate before signing. Quick NASL deal. No, okay, Caleb, you say that, but again, it's about leverage, right? The MLS should have taken him off the draft list because they don't want a player in the pool who has that leverage. Is that the only reason? If you make it clear to MLS teams, here's the baggage this player comes with, then they should be able to make that decision themselves. And again, this is just an odd situation. Probably doesn't mean a whole lot. But if you're the Cosmos, don't you get something out of tweaking MLS a little bit? Don't you get a little bit of a PR push? Don't you get a little bit of a profile upgrade in the minds of a lot of people? There are people out there who swear by the Cosmos, the future of American soccer. I'm not on board with that. But from a Cosmos perspective, we went after a kid that MLS wanted. We signed him first. He chose us. Now, he's been drafted by the Whitecaps. He's going to go to Vancouver. He's probably already there. Get weighed, fitted for a kit, whatever. He chose to try Vancouver, but he did sign with the Cosmos. They undercut MLS, at least on this one player. Cosmos create a lot of waves, and I'm still processing exactly what those waves mean. We're still analyzing what it could possibly mean. They've already caused problems within NASL by overpaying or paying more than what most NASL teams can pay for players who are wanted within the league. All right, we got Jeff Kassouf coming up in just a minute, but Duffy's on the line. What's up, Duffy?
Hey, how's it going?
No, what's up, man?
This real quick there.
Yeah, do that.
Just wanted to comment on the Lewis thing. So
okay, go ahead.
Oh, am I on?
You are on, Duffy. Go ahead.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I think it's more the Cosmos trying to stick it to MLS, and I think some of it could be Lewis playing more one against the other. You know, because signed. I
think that part is fair. Well, certainly Lewis being able to get some leverage. I think that's fairly obvious, at least from his agent's perspective. I mean, whether or not Lewis instigated it. I have my doubts. I imagine his agent said, "Here, sign with the Cosmos, gives you a bit of leverage with MLS." As for the Cosmos sort of tweaking MLS, does that mean anything, or is it just look? I mean, the Cosmos can sort of buzz around the outside of MLS and peck and hunt and do these little things, but does it actually impact MLS in any particular way?
I don't think so. I think it's more just them being the Cosmos. Cosmos are always trying to do things a little different, like, we're the Cosmos, but this isn't 1975 anymore. It's 2014, so, I don't think they're nearly as relevant as they want to be.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think that's just their way of staying in the spotlight, especially since you got two other teams in New York now starting in 2015. They're going to be taking more headlines from them.
Okay. Fair enough. Appreciate the comment, Duffy. Thanks a lot. As for the question about underclassmen declaring for the MLS Super Draft, Jonathan Tannewald confirming that he did read the piece. I assume he did. I assumed you did, Jonathan. Don't worry. MLS can make their draft rules the way they want to. They can make the rules as to who's eligible and who's not. That's up to them, nobody else. Now, teams outside of MLS are obviously not beholden to the draft. The Cosmos can sign anybody they want. Typically, MLS draftees are signed before they get there because it's essentially the central control of the contracts, and that makes it a guarantee. You sign you draft a player, he's got an MLS contract, he can come to you. You know exactly what you're dealing with. Obviously, Lewis was a different case, and I'm not sure what the percentage is. All right, let's take a break. We got to move quickly. We're going to talk NWSL with our friend Jeff Kassouf from Equalizer Soccer and NBC Sports. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Jason Davis back, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Joined now by Jeff Kassouf of Equalizer Soccer, NBCSports.com. Jeff, our NWSL expert today. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Jeff, you also do Olympic stuff, don't you?
I do. Yeah. I'm
getting ready for that.
What's that?
Are you doing the Winter Olympics? I mean, you're covering the Winter Olympics this.
Yeah. I'll be doing a lot with Sochi for the Olympic side during the games. So brushing up on some of my winter sports.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I thought you were gonna say Russian, but I guess you really don't need to do that.
So. No, I'm not going. So thankfully, right. I don't need to learn Russian.
All right, Jeff. So we grabbed you to talk. The MLS Super Draft last week at the same event, the NSCAA convention. NWSL holds their annual draft as well. In terms of where the NWSL has matured to, has the draft changed over the years, or are we pretty much still talking about the same process as it's been?
The process is pretty much the same. I'd say certainly, obviously, the strength of the classes, but it's definitely interesting from the perspective of what the draft is in an event itself. You looked at the Super Draft, and the Super Draft in Philly last week was kind of like a party. I mean, it was something that you wanted to be at. And the NWSL draft, if you group it in with WPS over the years, has gone from 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, the one in Philly in 2010 was basically that. I mean, it was a huge party that Puma put on. It was really a marquee event for the league. To last year when it just got started, it was a closed-door event that was really you probably got more out of it on Twitter than you were if you were there. Okay. And I was there, so I can speak to that. And then this time again back in Philly, maybe it's something about that city. It was something that the room they booked was not big enough for media, for fans. It was a bit of a nightmare to work, actually, because it was just too many people in there. So it's been a little bit up and down, but it's a good thing to see that it's sort of something that people want to be at again.
It's interesting. I hope they didn't have the same DJ as the MLS Super Draft, because that ear-splitting volume. I imagine that was a little bit better at the NWSL draft. So in terms of who got picked and where, were there any surprises in this draft? You mentioned the strength of the draft class that was relatively strong for this year.
Yeah, definitely a strong draft class. It was pretty interesting how that first round in particular, there really weren't many surprises. I mean, I think that first 6, you could really even argue the entire first round almost was pretty much as expected, as predicted. There was nothing really wild. You had Crystal Dunn at number 1, who was, she was the number 1 pick. Everybody knew that a year ago. I mean, she's easily the top player in this class, and she went to Washington. And then Kealia High going to the new team in Houston, which is her sister's down there. Brian Cushing, the Houston Texan, is her brother-in-law, so there was a clear connection there. And then Chicago drafting one of the best players in the country, who happens to be from Chicago. It was all a bit predictable in a way, which is good, I guess. Not the most interesting for us media covering it, but it was a strong class. It was pretty predictable, and I think some teams, especially Chicago and especially Washington, getting a talent like Crystal Dunn, can be very happy with what they got.
I'm looking at the draft here, the draft results. It seems that there's a nice kind of how do I say this? There's a large geographical representation, and I'll admit that I'm not up on my women's college soccer. What's the general strength of women's college soccer now? I mean, and I hate to do this, but I know that in women's college basketball, you end up with 5 or 6 really good teams, and then there's a giant gap to everybody else. How does women's college soccer stack up in relation to the strength from top to bottom?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see that gap maybe, but expanded more. Women's college basketball, I think everybody just, automatically thinks of a UConn, a Baylor, a Notre Dame. I think you can extend that a bit in women's soccer. It's not quite 5. Maybe it's, 10 to 12 that are really sort of in that title hunt. But the absolute strongest conference by far this season, and really over the past little bit here, has been the ACC. If you look at the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, but the ACC was by far, out of the 36 players, I think almost half of them came from the ACC. So it's a huge college soccer conference. I know it's very strong on the men's side as well. You look at this past tournament, all 4 number 1 seeds this past season were from the ACC, and they all went pretty deep into the tournament. So a lot of talent coming out of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
You mentioned Crystal Dunn, number 1. At number 2, the Houston Dash, the newest team in the NWSL, making their pick. You mentioned the Texan connections there for Ohio. The Dash had their expansion draft not too long ago, and I apologize, I don't have the date off the top of my head. From what I can tell, they went they focused on defense for that expansion draft. They get Ohio as a forward. They're going to start filling out their attack as we go along here. Have they already managed to do some of that in the draft?
Yeah, I think they did. I mean, Ohio's a big piece. She's a good attacking midfielder. I think, obviously there's always a transition, even with these best players. I think you'll hear every coach say it, that, from the college game to NWSL, same thing from the college game to MLS. There's a gap that has to be filled, and these rookies, even the best of them, are not necessarily going to jump right in and be immediately successful. But Kaylee Ohio, I think, definitely serves that need that they have attacking. They still don't really have, as you said, a go-to forward or a striker that's really going to stand out. And it's interesting because it's a strikers league. I mean, you look at the Flash with Wambach, you look at Portland with Sinclair and Morgan. This is a league that is built around strikers. So they probably need to go out and find one. I'm sure that's in the works. And to be honest, after having the expansion draft already, unless they're pulling some trades, it's probably going to have to be something that maybe comes from international waters, or one of these players that they drafted, like Anela Mazer, steps up and really has a best season to date.
Obviously, the strength of the NWSL and part of what was going to benefit the league coming into the creation of it was CONCACAF teams providing their best women players to the league. Certainly the United States is the leader there. We know that they maintain their position as one of the best teams in the world year to year. But internationally and beyond just Mexico, United States, and Canada, how does the league do in attracting players? And honestly, from a college perspective, how do college teams do attracting international talent?
Well, it's interesting because of the timing. You look at, we're about 18 months from the next World Cup, and the trend here, which the U.S., I guess it's just sort of the American thing that it's come under a bit of scrutiny, but the U.S. is one of a lot of federations that are saying to their players, we need you home. We're coming close to being a year from a World Cup. We need you in a lot of camps. We need you accessible. So these U.S. players are actually, Sunil Gulati said at the draft last week, it's in their contracts that they will play in the NWSL. So you see these players coming home. You see the Canadians staying home. And likewise, this is no different than, the Germans who all the German players in 2011, before that World Cup on their home soil, stayed in the Bundesliga, stayed close to home. So this is something that, it's not unprecedented. So in terms of internationals coming to NWSL, it's very tough because a lot of these federations want their players home. Some of the more fringe teams, if you will, that aren't quite top team in the world, that recognize that their players can get better in the NWSL are fine with it. But it's something that, Gulati mentioned that another federation might get involved in the level that Canada and the U.S. are, but the talks ultimately broke down, and next year is pretty much impossible because it's a World Cup year. The word is that's probably Brazil. It's not confirmed, but, now it's not going to happen next year, as he said, because there's a World Cup.
The recent news is that Megan Rapinoe is leaving Lyon in France to join the Seattle Reign and will play the full season. She only played half the year with the Reign last year. Is any of that tied to what you just spoke to? I mean, she says it's the best for my life. She's obviously entitled to make her own decision. How much of this is not really working out at Lyon?
Yeah, I think it's a small part in her case in terms of U.S. soccer. A lot of it, Lyon is a stacked team, as we know. They just lost to PSG over the weekend. That snapped a 87 game unbeaten streak in league play for them, and she didn't feature in that match. So. She's kind of been a player who's been, she'll start sometimes, maybe sometimes she won't come into a match like this past weekend. I think that she's improved greatly technically at Lyon. You can see it when she came home and played for Seattle for that half season, that she was She's always been a technical player, but she just had a new life and a new energy about her. So I think in that sense, it served, that time there served its purpose. She talked about getting the experience abroad. And I think for her, it's just that time to come home. I mean, she was coming home anyway 6 months from now. So, and she likely wasn't going back to Lyon for that half season anyway, because what we just talked about with the World Cup approaching. So, in the end, it's 6 months early. It's great for Seattle. They get her for a full season. It makes them even more of a contender to have her around. And I think for her, being one of the bigger named players on this team, I think she's got a little bit more pull if she said, hey, I'm staying in Lyon until I want to stay. So I think this is genuinely her decision.
It'll be interesting. I mean, my grasp on the dynamic of American women players going abroad, and Lyon certainly, as you said, an incredibly stacked team, one of the most recognizable women's team in Europe, and the NWSL trying to get their teams to that level is an ongoing process. Is there, and with the pressure of the World Cup and staying at home and being here for camps and being here for friendlies, is there ever a possibility of American players going abroad in large numbers? I know there's a couple of American players who are making their living abroad right now.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. Unfortunately, probably not for a few years. I think, the 2015 World Cup, and then you look at the 2016 Olympics right after that, which on the men's side really doesn't affect much. On the women's side, that's really your secondary tournament there. That's sort of 1A to the World Cup. So, it's definitely something that I think could happen. It's something that was starting to happen, and then U.S. Soccer stepped in. There was some of the top talent on this team that, not a Wambach or a Morgan, but Rapinoe, Press, Klingenberg, Engen, all these players that went overseas, even if it was on loan, a Krieger, a Harris. There were a lot of players this past fall and in this past year or so going abroad, but I think really 2017 is probably that year for that, to see anything en masse because of these major tournaments.
The development of the club game is fascinating on the women's side. All right, while I have you here, Jeff, let me ask you about, we just had the Ballon d'Or and FIFA Women's Player of the Year presentations in Zurich. Nadine Angerer wins Women's Player of the Year. It seems that this is pretty much based on a very strong Euro tournament. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. I actually wrote about this a couple months ago, actually, before it even, before this vote came around. I actually held the U.S. media vote for the women's side. And Angerer was not on my ballot, I'll admit. I sat there and I asked myself, I said, this vote is always tournament-based. Right. That's one of my big beefs. I think that league play needs to come into account more. And I asked myself, certainly she had a great tournament, but as a 35-year-old goalkeeper who made some big saves, stopped 2 PKs in a major tournament final, is she the best player in the world? And my answer was, there was no way to say yes to that.
Right. I find it fascinating because I don't believe this would ever happen on the men's side, and that's a fundamental disconnect between the way the women player, and nothing against Angerer, but it's a fundamental disconnect between the way that the men's and obviously, as you said, club soccer needs to be the club game needs to be more part of the discussion, but it also speaks to sort of the struggles of the women's club game to get traction and get people paying attention.
Absolutely, and it's tough. Even I'll admit for myself, a U.S. voter, how much can I see Lyon play? How much can I see some of these Bundesliga teams play? I can, but not in the frequency that I can see. I've watched, I've seen every NWSL game that's been played thus far. And it's the same for, a German voter trying to talk about NWSL or all of these. It's just, it makes it tough. It's not like I can turn the TV on like with the Premier League or Bundesliga. All of these men's leagues are everywhere. So it's a little bit harder on the women's game.
Yeah, let's hope it continues to get better on that front. And I don't know. It comes up because you mentioned it. What's the TV situation for NWSL in 2014?
Still to be determined. I know they'll be on TV. My guess and a strong hunch would be Fox Soccer again. Okay. They have a vested interest with the World Cup coming up. All
right, there you go. Jeff Kassouf from EqualizerSoccer.com and NBC Sports, talking little NWSL women's soccer. Thanks for your time, Jeff. I appreciate it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll close out this edition of Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Stay right there. Jason Davis back. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, Tuesday edition of the show. 4-day work week for everybody. I'm assuming I'm sure some people worked yesterday. I apologize. The rest of the country gets a 4-day work week. We had a 4-day work week around here. I have to, again, thank everybody who contributed to the Indiegogo campaign for Soccer Morning. It was a rousing success, and that is entirely because you guys are such great people. Every single one of all 361 of you are amazing, amazing people. If you are still interested in contributing, even though we hit the goal, and no pressure, no. If you want to add something, say that you were part of it. It is soccermorning.com. We are headed down the home stretch. The website says 40 hours. I think that's probably not right. I think we're closer to 24 hours, something like that. So go ahead and check it out if you want to. Again, thank you very much to everybody that contributed to the show. A couple of people popping up in the Soccer Morning timeline saying they did so today. So very much appreciated. All right, let's tie up some odds and ends here. Let's wrap things up on a Tuesday. Again, we're coming out of a weekend with some interesting results around the world. We plan to talk La Liga in the very near future. That league is getting extremely interesting. That's a league that has long been a foregone conclusion, at least in terms of who would be the top two. We might not always know what order they would show up in the final standings, but they would be there. Top two: Barcelona, Real Madrid. Scotland with a little bit more flash. I mean, sorry, not exactly. But right now, this is a very interesting league. 20 games into the season, Barcelona tied on points, top of the table with Atletico Madrid, 51. Real Madrid sitting 1 point back on 50. Now you got a gap there, 11 points back to fourth place and Bilbao. But those three teams make La Liga that much more interesting than it's been in any season in recent memory, right? Certainly. Villarreal, 37 in fifth place. So you have Atleti making a stand, making a case to go and win this thing. I believe Paul Carr at ESPN put out some odds over the weekend, maybe yesterday. And Real Madrid right now are the favorite to win La Liga. I think that's a little surprising. Barcelona dealing with the absence of Neymar, who's injured, and whose transfer fee is being debated hotly among people. Was it this many million? Was it that many million? How much million? How many million did his parents get? How many yachts did they buy? I know Neymar's got a yacht. I've seen the photos. Very nice yacht. Very, very nice yacht. Speaking of big money, here's something fascinating. Chevrolet, the American car maker, everybody knows Chevrolet, part of General Motors, who was the beneficiary of a U.S. government bailout not too long ago, signed up with Manchester United to be Manchester United's sponsor. Now, what I know of this, and some of this I'm going off of memory here, but what I know about this is that the individual responsible at GM for signing the deal with Manchester United signed this deal, which included the chairs, the bench essentially would have the Chevy logo. All the players got Chevy cars. I've seen those photos that happened a couple years ago. Like Nemanja Vidic with a I don't know, Chevy. What's a Chevy car? I honestly can't think of one off the top of my head. Camaro. I don't know. Something. So he signs this deal. It did not include shirt sponsorship, and it was something like $500 million. Again, off of memory here. If I get a couple of these details wrong, I apologize. But the gist of this is true. Signed a massive sponsorship deal with Manchester United that did not include shirt sponsorship. Now, this is when Chevrolet was attempting to get themselves more integrated into a European market that they had not managed to crack. They've got Opel and Vauxhall. Those are their brands that they have in Europe, but they haven't. The Chevy brand itself has never really made a dent in Europe. This individual who signed the deal with United got fired because of this lack of a shirt sponsorship. My guess is that the board members at GM, whoever's making the decisions, got around the table and said that they don't know anything about soccer. I'm guessing. I'm sorry, I'm stereotyping my own people, Americans. And they said, wait a second, we're paying this much money and we're not even going to be on the shirt? We want to be on the shirt. Now, if I remember correctly, there may have been a discussion about putting Chevrolet on the shirt. That may have been out there somewhere. But as far as I know now, this is the most recent development, is that Chevrolet has decided to pull the brand out of the European market. So they're not even going to try to sell Chevys in Europe anymore. Now, the saving grace, and I think that this is what you'll see in the analysis of this decision and what they still have going on with Manchester United, the saving grace is that Manchester United is huge in Asia, and that's they'll sell cars in Asia because Manchester United's connected to Chevrolet. I suppose that's possible. Here's some of the deals. Here's some of the details. Excuse me. When the number one U.S. automaker announced in 2012 it was paying $559 million over 7 years to slap the Chevy bow tie logo on the jerseys of Man United players. Remember, that was not originally part of the deal. They negotiated that somehow. I don't really remember how. The steep price tag turned heads. Now they announced that they will pull out of Europe by the end of 2015. Soccer is a big money sport. Manchester United's data and its fan base backs GM's argument because the club says almost half of it, and this is about Asia, 659 million followers. Remember that number? Manchester United has 659 million followers. What does that mean? What is that? 659 million people know who Manchester United is. That I believe. They don't have 659 million fans, do they? All right, let's put speaking of bow ties, Chevrolet logo bow tie. Let's speaking of bow ties, let's put one on this diving discussion with one more tweet from Jack Tacular on Twitter. He says the discussion's missing something. When I'm being abused and a guy's about to kick me again, I go down. If the ref isn't protecting me, then I need to find a way to stop getting kicked. If I go down easy, is it a dive? Why you got to make it even more complicated, Jack Tacular? And he's got a point. If you're being, if physical play is part of the deal and the referee is not taking care of it, is it okay to simulate so that you might get a call or a card comes out and maybe that player backs off a little bit? It's a lot of gray area, everybody. Again, thank you very much for everybody who has contributed to the Indiegogo campaign. If you're still interested, soccermorning.com. You got until tomorrow. We are full steam ahead now in 2014. We'll line up an excellent show for you tomorrow as well. Hopefully going to talk some La Liga. We've got a couple of feelers out there for guests. If there's anybody you want to hear on the show, I'm open to suggestions at Soccer Morning on Twitter. Hit us up. We'll take your suggestions. All right, producer Trevor. Am I missing anything? Did I forget anything? How did I do today? Thumbs up, thumbs down? You're not going to tell me anything, are you? All right, let's get out of here. Let's just finish this one up. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to everybody who called. Thanks to Jeff Kassouf from Equalizer Soccer and NBC Sports. We will talk to you on Wednesday. Bye.
On the boulevard, I landed. We used to kick routines and the presence was fitting. It was I, the abstract, and me, the 5-footer.